Within an economically deprived community in 90s Adelaide, with nothing to do and even less opportunity out from this life, Jamie and his brothers are sexually abused by a neighbour supervising them. Once their mother discovers this traumatic event, her new boyfriend, John Justin Bunting, concocts plans of revenge that encourages the abusive neighbour to move away. This vengeful side of John extends towards a shared anger amongst the community, which accuses others of being equally deplorable. With his charismatic coercive control, John uses this as an opportunity to rationalise his violent tendencies towards gay men, drug addicts, and the disabled, who he views so resentfully that he places them within the same category as sexual abusers. As John's plans to rid the community of people who disgust him come to fruition, Jamie is caught within a dreadful quandary. Does he side with the father-like role model who encouraged him to stand against his abusers, therefore becoming an abusive pawn himself? This is Justin Kurzel's directorial debut Snowtown, also known as the Snowtown Murders, a social realist recollection of the true events that led to the arrests of Jamie Vlasakis and the man deemed Australia's worst serial killer, John Justin Bunting. Completely unflinching in its portrayal of hatred and violence, Snowtown is a cold exploration of vulnerable masculinity in the hands of a charismatic sadist that humanises the conditions which leads to young victims of violence becoming perpetrators of such violence themselves. But in doing this, Kurzel's film also remembers to not undermine the scale and cruelty of the actions it depicts, as well as acknowledging the contributions to these serial killings from the people associated with John Justin Bunting. Justin Kurzel's film pays particularly close attention to accuracy in portraying the real-life case of the Snowtown murders. John Justin Bunting was sentenced to 11 life sentences without the opportunity for parole due to committing 11 murders. Jamie Vlasakis, who is framed as the film's protagonist, was given a lighter sentence, although lighter here doesn't necessarily imply a light sentence overall, of 4 life sentences with a minimum of 26 years without the opportunity of parole. Jamie's sentence is considerably shorter due to his willingness to confess and cooperate with the court, confessing to his guilt in committing 4 murders. Within Australia, this was a trial which ensnared the nation. The extent of torture and murder which John Bunting and his associates managed to undertake spanned 6 years, the acts of cruelty being calculated to hide suspicions of their victims' disappearances by forcing them to record a final voicemail message to their loved ones under the guise that they had met another partner or that they had planned to leave town. It's in how effective John Bunting was in his murderous manipulation, in his ability to normalise and recruit others based on justifying and scapegoating their violent tendencies, that makes this case as horrifying as it is. In Justin Kurzel's adaptation of these events, Jamie is portrayed as an emotionally vulnerable teenager. He has suffered sexual abuse from his neighbour, who was trusted to supervise them while his mother was busy, and his own older brother Troy decides to sexually assault him too. John, to Jamie, encapsulates the force of a man willing to fight back against abusive and predatory injustice. At least that's the first impression anyway. When John questions whether Jamie likes getting fucked, figuratively speaking, John is asking if Jamie likes to be pushed around by people bigger than him. This scene indicates that Jamie clearly doesn't want to be a victim anymore, but through John, he's at an ethical crossroads, a victim of John's manipulation, by fighting back against people deemed weak by John, implying that given the opportunity, these types of people would also hurt Jamie. Do the ends justify the violent means? Amongst this ethical quandary, Jamie's decision becomes even more difficult as he gradually bonds with John. John serving as a dominant father figure, a role model, the relationship between the two being a dysfunctional reflection of a father-son bond that Jamie hasn't had before. Within this emotional and social complexity, Jamie is a young vulnerable figure, and John recognises that, coercing Jamie into a sense of security through their bonding, before demanding Jamie assists in John's serial killings. In simplest terms, John's greed for influence is motivating the manipulation of Jamie into becoming an abuser too, making Jamie a psychological victim of John. Peter Bradshaw, within his review of Snowtown for The Guardian, articulates effectively where John's motivation stems from, stating that this is a well-made but gruesome and often unwatchably violent film, made the more disturbing by its deferred and indirect revelations about the killer's modus operandi, his intimate social embeddedness with his victims, his ambiguous motivation, and the way he makes those closest to the victims complicit in the crimes. Occasionally, some people at John's boozy and rancorous get-togethers will screw their courage up to ask him what his revenge fantasies are really all about. Well, an in-depth investigation of John's mind may not be all that rewarding. He is just another sociopath with a hatred of those he finds threatening, and a compulsion to involve and incriminate other people in the counterattack. It's not an answer that provides closure or satisfaction, but it's likely the truth. John is a sociopath who wants to rid the world of people he deems threatening. It's not necessarily that he even hates sexual abusers at the heart of his actions, as not all of his victims are such predatory people, but that John is curating a rationale that he can use to justify his violent bravado shared during the communal get-togethers throughout the film. It's this rationale, reinforced by neighbours who agree with him, who warm to him, that he manages to include them as his new associates, establishing a cycle of violence. With Jamie specifically, the cyclical nature of violence is reinforced in Jamie's loyalty to John, even during Jamie's reluctance towards John's orders, such as John's demand that Jamie shoot a dog to get him used to using a gun and desensitizing him to harsh violence, a relationship simultaneously based on a genuine bond and based on fear. We uncover the cruel irony in how Jamie, by following the murderous and torturous tactics of John, a young teenager who is a victim of abuse, gradually becomes a contributor to more abuse. Without the necessary support in place, and without any sense of wider justice in the community, Jamie is portrayed with no other opportunity than to ally with John, a man exploiting local frustrations towards injustice to justify his own vitriolic tendencies. This is a significant tragedy within Justin Kurzel's film, the devastating reality that some victims perpetrate their own method of victimization, and that malevolent figures know exactly how to empower that to their own vicious benefit. In conclusion, Justin Kurzel's Snowtown is disturbing in its thoughtful portrayal of the Snowtown murders, framing how exactly John Justin Bunting managed to infiltrate a community and normalise serial killing and torture, manipulating communal goodwill and youthful vulnerability for his own gain. Unflinching, frightening, thoroughly ominous in its believability, while also highlighting the genuine cause of frustration when communities are faced with a lack of legal justice and economic opportunity. Justin Kurzel's Snowtown is the epitome of bleak. A special thank you to my incredible tier Patreon supporter Gil, and my super tier Patreon supporters Constantine Bombelli and Jamie.